Hello everyone and welcome back to another deck tech. This time we're going to be looking at a mono red Pauper list that's a bit different than a normal red list would be. This one's focused more on creatures, specifically haste enablers like Generator Servant, which is the namesake card of the deck, which is Generator Red. So like I mentioned earlier, we're utilizing haste enablers in order to give our small creatures haste and to pressure our opponent with creatures, as opposed to using burn spells and risking running out and having to deal with our opponent's life gain and stuff like that. This time we're going to be focusing much more on combat. We begin with the full playset of Bloodlust Insider. Now, I did make this deck originally like about a year or so ago, and I featured it on my channel. It was my very first deck tech, but it was a bit slow and clunky, but with the introduction of this card in Amonkhet, it really shines. It really makes this deck run super well, because having a turn 1 haste enabler is very crucial for this strategy. Yeah, Generator Servant is great and all, but this card may actually be the real all-star of the deck. Next up, we have a playset of the namesake card Generator Servant, and this card is kind of a weird red mana dork, kind of. Not really, because it doesn't get to stay on the field and continuously make mana for us. It's only a one-time investment, but whether we use it on instants or sorceries, it's fine because it pays for itself. But if we can use it on creatures, we give them haste, which is kind of what we're trying to be doing with this deck. We're trying to turn 1 play something, turn 2 play Generator Servant, turn 3 crack, and then use that mana to play 2 creatures and swing in both and just give a lot of pressure to our opponents. The next card in our list is a bit contradictory to Generator Servant, and that's Burning Tree Emissary. And yeah, while we can't use the mana from Generator Servant to cast it, Burning Tree Emissary pays for itself, so we could cast 2 or 3 off of each other and then follow it up with another 2-drop, and that pretty much just goes along with the strategy of this deck and what we want to be doing anyways. Like, just say in the event that we don't have a Generator Servant, Burning Tree Emissary works kind of just as fine, because this is pretty much a deck that's trying to retain as much value as it can. Next up, we have a full playset of Aether Chaser. Now, I did used to have Mogg War Marshal in its place, but I kind of realize that having a 2/1 first strike is just better than having a 1/1 that makes a 1/1 when it ETBs and then makes another 1/1 when it dies. I'd rather just have 2 bodies and one of them having first strike, and we get the same amount of power anyways, but first strike is just way much more relevant in combat than 2 1/1s could be, in my opinion. Next, we have a full playset of one of the trickier cards in the deck, and one of the cards that helps make the deck tick essentially, and that's Sting Scourger, and it's essentially the red mana war, but it's a mana cheaper, but at that cost we also get Echo tacked on top of it. Whatever, if you have the 4 mana to pay for Echo, good enough, but paying 2 mana or effectively 1 mana if you use Generator Servant and be able to cast another 2-drop and bounce their creature is a great tempo play, especially if all your stuff can just swing in. That's the kind of stuff that can turn the tide of a battle in just one single combat step. Next, we have 3 Borderland Marauder, and now normally I would not be playing a creature like this in a Pauper deck, but since we are taking advantage of mana and being able to use that to make haste creatures, having a 3-power creature on turn 2, ideally you want to play maybe 2 of these on turn 2, which would be really sweet, and get 6 power swinging on in. That's great. But beyond the applications of this deck, Borderland Marauder is just it's fine. And for the final creature of this deck, we have a full playset of Valley Dasher. Now, looking at this card, it's not really that impressive, but I was watching another Pauper content creator, and he made a blue-red Delver list, and I think the only creatures in there were Delver Secrets and Valley Dasher, and I was a bit confused. And then I kind of realized that being able to play a Valley Dasher on turn 2, and it can swing in immediately because it has haste, and you have to attack with it each turn, messes up your opponent, especially if you're playing a bunch of other creatures like we are in this deck, and they're just all going in just constantly and just berating. A card like Valley Dasher is perfect for this strategy, and I actually kind of want to try it out in other strategies, because a 2/2 with haste is no joke on turn 2, so this card it seems good and it's doing well for me, and I'm going to keep trying it out in the future. Starting with our non-creature spells, we have a 3 of Infectious Bloodlust. Now, originally I did have Madcap skills in the main board of this deck because it gives our creatures evasion, just in case the board gets gummed up and this is a creature-centered deck, and having evasion is very relevant in especially Pauper games. But I realized that Infectious Bloodlust, yeah, while we do lose a power and like a point of power, we do gain that back in toughness, and the card replaces itself whenever the creature dies anyway. So it just being able to replace itself like that and keep giving our creatures bigger bodies than our opponents can handle, especially when we're gumming up the board with a bunch of decently sized creatures to begin with. A card like this can really push things in our favor very quickly. And for one of the weirder cards in the deck, and I know the deck's already weird enough as is, we have a 2 of Dynacharge. Now this card can be normally used as a combat trick if you need to, but let's say you get a bunch of creatures out on the board at once and your opponent's got a bunch of decent blockers. You cast a Dynacharge for its overload cost, which is pretty much Trumpet Blast, and you can just crash through your opponent's creatures in an instant. Trumpet Blast is a classic combat trick, and Dynacharge is very much like that, except it's much more flexible, in my opinion, much better. In terms of removal spells, we have a 4 of Lightning Bolt. You know, Lightning Bolt's classic. We can use it to lob it at our opponent's faces if they're at a low enough life total and we can't get through with creatures, or we can just use it as a normal piece of removal, which is what we will be using it 99% of the time anyways. Our final burn spell here will only hit creatures 100% of the time, and that's Flame Slash, but hey, you know what, for 1 extra point of damage, that's fine. We can use that to knock out Mirror Enforcers, Mnemonic Walls, any other large big butt threats, because let's be honest here, not much goes beyond 4 points of toughness in this format beyond like Gurmag Angler and Ulamog's Crusher, so Flame Slash will take out the good majority of them. Moving on to the lands in the deck, we have a 3 of Forgotten Cave, and since this is mono red and Pauper, we don't really have access to that many options for drawing, and we don't want to really run Faithless Looting because we're not trying to get our stuff in the bin or trying to cycle through things really fast. But having a cycling source in the form of Forgotten Cave is decent enough for this deck, and then we're also running 18 mountains. There's nothing really special I can say about mountains. I guess I can give a random fact. I think Mountain is the card that exists most in Magic because it was printed in Arabian Nights by itself without any of the other basic lands. So that's your fact of the day. Moving on to the sideboard, we take a look at one more Flame Slash. You know, you bring it in against any other decks that you need to bring it in against, like Tron. Usually you always want to bring this in against Stompy, definitely. Delver, definitely. Pretty much any creature's decks, just Flame Slash is a good card. We also have a 4 of Electrickery, and very much like Dynacharge, the flexibility of this card is very, very key because you can use it to, you know, shoot a creature for a single point of damage, or you can use it for its overload cost to cast a mini Shrivel. And a mini Shrivel is essentially just a one-sided Shrivel, which is way better than Shrivel. So if you're playing a red deck in Pauper, you should be playing Electrickery, especially mono red, because this card, like I've said before, flexibility is key, especially in a format like Pauper, and a card like this is very, very good. We also have a 3 of Pyroblast here because we don't really have that many ways to interact with blue decks on an instant level except for Pyroblast, so, you know, if Delver's giving you a rough time, Pyroblast will help you out definitely with that, or Tron for that matter. It's just an auto include for against any blue decks, and this card does take up a large majority of the budget of this deck, but it's like $30 anyway, so it's not really that big of an investment. So we're also running another weird random card, and that's Hearth Charm, and like as I said a million times in this deck already, flexibility is key, and Hearth Charm does 3 separate different things. The first mode, we can destroy an artifact creature that's really good and relevant against Affinity. Its second mode is kind of like a mini Dynacharge, which, hey, you know what, more access to Dynacharge the better. And then its third ability, we can pretty much give our creature evasion and push through for the last points of damage. So bring this in against any matchups you see fit where you think another Trumpet Blast would be good, or more artifact removal like Affinity. Couldn't remember the name, but this card, again, flexibility is key. Flexible means good. This card is good. I did mention Madcap Skills earlier in the video, and that's because I still kept it in the board. And Madcap Skills, we bring this in against any decks where we do need that evasion and we do need to push through if they're gumming up the board way better than we can. Like Stompy, for instance, is a deck that can do what we're doing but much better, and Madcap Skills helps us out significantly against that. or any other, like mono white soldiers is also really good. Mono white heroic, being able to force them to block and hopefully destroy a lot of their suited up stuff. You know, this card it's not the best because I think Infectious Bloodlust is just significantly better than this card, but it does have its uses, and this can run away games for you. And for the last card in the sideboard, we have the trusty Relic of Pro Genesis. If budget really is a thing for you, you can shave the budget of this deck by a few bucks by going with Tormod's Crypt instead, but you might as well play Relic because it's just much better, and it's another source of card draw. If you ever need it for whatever reason, just play Relic of Pro Genesis, at least a one-of. Come on, the card is great. And that's the Pauper deck tag for you, everyone. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below, and let me know down in the comments what you'd like to see more from in terms of deck tags in the future. Anyways, my name's Tasty Snackies. You all been wonderful, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out our playlist of Pauper content here, and also our other MTG videos here. Don't forget to subscribe and to also hit that bell icon so you get notified every time we release content.